Hello everyone and welcome to this month's synth tutorial with computer music, and this month we're going to be creating a fantastic pumping synth sound using our favoured Zebra CM plugin. And this is going to be a good benchmark and starting point for moving into different areas of production. So the sound that we're going to create is relatively flat in terms of its timbre makeup, but you can then open it up and broaden it and use it in lots of different styles of music such as dance music and EDM. So let's get stuck in. The first thing we need to do is load up a favoured DAW and load up an instance of the Zebra CM plugin. We then go to the display at the top of the plugin and we're going to select Init, which stands for Initialize, which will be at the bottom of every menu. This has now initialized our sound and we should hear something like this. What we're hearing there is just a single oscillator in play, and it's playing a sawtooth. We're going to build this patch from the oscillators upwards, so we start by adjusting the volume of oscillator 1. We want to leave oscillator 1 playing a sawtooth, but we want to reduce its volume a little bit. So we're just going to reduce this to roughly the 10 o'clock mark, but somewhere around 60-65 on the display at the top will be just fine. We're going to be using the second oscillator in a more central role, and that will be louder as a consequence. Talking of which, let's now move to oscillator 2. We're going to make a similar tweak here, so we're going to go to the volume control of oscillator 2 and increase it all the way to the 12 o'clock mark, which will hopefully be around about 100 on the central display at the top. Next thing we're going to do is alter the waveform that we have set on oscillator 2. At the moment it's also playing a sawtooth, but we're going to change this. So by clicking in the center of the wave display, we're going to drag the mouse upwards and increase that value until it reads 6.2. The waveform that we'll get at this point is something of a hybrid wave, and consequently it has quite a harsh tone to it, and it's perfect for our requirements. The final tweak we need to make to oscillator 2 is related to the tuning. So we move to the tuning pot directly above the wave control, and we're going to drag that all the way up so that the display at the top reads 12. This relates to 12 semitones, which is exactly the same as 1 octave. At this point we'll be hearing two oscillators in play, and they'll sound like this. Now we're going to move over to the filter section. The filter section's on the right hand side of the plugin, so we move over to where it says filter, and we're going to change the filter type straight away. We could actually use any of the filters that are available within the Zebra CM plugin. However, we're going to go with the one that's labelled LP mid-drive. This is a low pass filter, in other words it lets the low frequencies through as we move the cutoff control. However, it also has a little bit of a peak, which is what this icon is displaying here, and it's perfect for our requirements for this particular patch. We want to create a little bit of an overdrive setting, so we're going to employ the filter's drive control to add a little bit of distortion and colour. So we drag this control all the way up so that on the display it reads roughly 32. You can go higher if you want to. If you do, it'll merely sound more distorted. So how far you choose to take your overdrive is largely dependent on the kind of production style you're working in. Now we need to go to the cutoff control, and we're going to drag that down so that it's a position of roughly 92, which is just around about the 1 o'clock mark. To create our pumping sound, we're going to be using the filter to create this effect, but we're going to be modulating it from a different source. So we need to go to one of these user-definable pots. I'm taking the one that's in the middle at the bottom of the filter section here, and I'm going to switch this to LFO2. Having selected LFO2, I need to decide how much modulation I want to be applied. So I'm going to take this control and I'm going to drag it up so that it reads roughly 15. Again, you can take that further, but it just depends on how much of the pumping effect you want. The source of the actual pumping effect is going to be LFO2, and as you can see we have three LFOs here. We've got LFO1, a global LFO, and we're going to be using LFO2. So once you've selected LFO2, you then go to the waveform display where there's a drop-down menu, and we're going to select Saw Up. This means that it's a saw waveform, but in reverse. If we audition the sound at this point, we're going to hear something like this. Now that pumping effect is quite quick, and that's all to do with the synchronization rate. So if we stay within the LFO section, you will see that the sync control is right here, right above where it says sync. We're going to select that drop-down, and we're going to change it to quarter notes. Quarter notes are sometimes known as crotchets, and that should equate to every beat of your bar, which is often where you've got things like a bass drum playing. When we audition this now, it sounds like this. Now we've got our basic pumping sound there, but as I said earlier, you can build upon this sound and do all sorts of smart things depending on the style of production you're after. So if you want to make that sound a lot more aggressive, one of the things you can do is go back to the oscillator section and employ some of the aliasing techniques. We do this by clicking on the number 4 in both oscillators, and that will give us a sound like this. We can then thicken this further by detuning both oscillators. So the moment you start playing a chord, you end up with something that sounds a bit like this. But that's sounding quite intense now, and you can see it's making my metering peak, so I'll need to turn that down a little bit. I'm going to revert back to our basic construct, and I'm going to undo the detuning that we just did. One final part of the production puzzle might be to add some EQ and some effects. So I'm going to use my Logic EQ that I have here. You can just see that I've sweetened the higher frequencies a little bit, and I've put a little cut from the mid-range downwards. That just has the effect of brightening everything. And finally, I've put in a little bit of room reverb. This is the Reverb plugin, which is available in Logic, but there will be others that are equivalent in other DAWs. It just adds a little bit of ambience around our sound. So feel free to use this patch as a starting point to build upon. You can create some fantastic huge colours with this, and also don't forget you can add plenty of distortion and overdrive to create some really gnarly and aggressive effects. Have fun!